This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and we have a very interesting topic today where we're going to be dealing with the topic of educating board members on social media challenges. And my guest for this show is Doug Chia, who's the Assistant General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Johnson & Johnson. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, TK.
Well, since you're a corporate secretary, and that deals with the board, and first question that I want to ask you is if you could take a look at how your duties have changed. Obviously, the board is more transparent.
Yeah.
And take a look over the last 5 years and tell me how your role has changed in dealing with the board.
Well, I think, you hit it on the head in terms of transparency. There are just a lot more demands on the board these days, really external demands coming from investors and the SEC for basically people want more of a look into what does exactly the board do. And so they are asking for more detailed explanations of what the board does with regard to specific topics. And so you can see with executive compensation, a proxy statement from 5 years ago compared to now is much different. If you look at things like the disclosure of board risk, board director nominee descriptions in terms of the biographical materials, it's much lengthier than it used to be. And so these are all pretty much from requests for more information, some of it from the investors directly, and a lot of it from the SEC, kind of on behalf of the investment community.
Mm-hmm. What kind of? I know you get a lot of questions from the outside in.
Yep.
As the corporate secretary, what kind of questions do you get from the inside, from your own directors? What are they looking to you for, and what are the typical questions?
Well, I think that they're expecting the corporate secretary these days to be more plugged into what are investors asking for, kind of take the temperature of investors and let us know with regards to corporate governance issues in general, and also specifically with regards to your own company, and really expecting you to be on top of the most recent developments coming out of the SEC, predictions on where things are going to go, predictions in terms of what can we expect at our next shareholders meeting, those kinds of things. So board members are really relying on the corporate secretary to be their eyes and ears in the governance field.
Well, and that's going to be a continuing challenging job, because
Yep.
I'm not sure that it's going to be any less, particularly as we see the rulemaking happening with Dodd-Frank.
Exactly.
So the reason I asked you here specifically is in your group of peers, you're known as sort of the social media guru. So whether that's good or bad, that's how you've been labeled. And in fact, when we leave this show, you're going to be going upstairs. There's a room full of GCs at our GC forum that you're going to be educating, talking to them about social media challenges.
Yep.
But so share with us a little bit about what you might be sharing with your peers upstairs, but more importantly, what do you share with board members?
Well, I guess first of all, it's really funny to me that I've become known as some kind of a social media guru, because I don't consider myself really a guru of anything. It really just so happens that I'm probably the only corporate secretary who's very active in the social media space. And so, I am on Twitter a lot, LinkedIn, Facebook, these types of new communication tools, corresponding with other people in the corporate governance field, not specifically about my company, because I'm not the official social media spokesperson for my company, but just about developing issues. In terms of what my message for today and the message for boards in general is really about just being aware of how is social media being used by your company and really against your company. I look at it as a kind of an offense. You have to be playing and paying attention to offense and defense at the same time. So in terms of offense, what is your company's social media strategy? Does it even have a social media strategy? And if so, what kind of social media projects are being carried out to really drive the business? Because that's really where companies can use this to their advantage to really gain a competitive advantage, get to customers quicker and more efficiently. But there have to be policies and procedures around how that plays out. And the policies and procedures are designed around the potential pitfalls in this area. And so general counsels need to be asking those questions in terms of, okay, we have this social media initiative. Tell me, what kind of controls do we have around it? Who owns it? How do we govern the information? And boards need to understand that too. They don't need to be experts, but they at least have to know that management has this under control. In terms of defense, here's where I think probably board members are most concerned in terms of how can people use social media to essentially take down your company, take down its reputation, invade your privacy walls, all these kinds of threats that are out there when it comes to technology. We see examples of social media playing big roles in social unrest in the United States and abroad. Got a lot of attention in the Middle East with regards to Egypt and Libya. And if it can play that big a role in those types of uprisings, surely it can do a number on a corporate reputation pretty quickly. And there are plenty of examples of that happening, some of which I'm going to be talking about this afternoon.
Well, certainly your company has an advantage in the sense of how knowledgeable you are of it. We'll see most cases a director will not have a Facebook page, for example. And so, but at the same time, they need to know the power of Facebook, or they don't tweet, but they need to know the power of that, because with the way things can go viral these days, somebody could be on a plane, and it could be worldwide by the time they land.
Exactly. And so, when you talk about the risks here, and you kind of give examples of these, possibilities for major reputational damage, a lot of people, a lot of board members' natural reaction would be, well, why are we doing this at all? Why are we involved in the social media space? If there's such a risk here, why don't we just shut it down? But that's where the company's got to explain to the senior management and the board why it's in that space. And there are good reasons why companies, especially very consumer-facing companies, are in that space. It's highly competitive, and like the internet, in a number of years, it's probably going to be just part of everyday life for people. Whereas with the internet, people were very hesitant to go in at first. The companies that really understood where it was going, they got in, they embraced the technology, and they have it intertwined throughout their entire business strategy. And so I think social media, it's safe to say it's going in that direction if it's not there already. And so this is not something you can just ignore, hope it goes away, and your company can try to sit it out and wait. It's happening. If you're not doing it, your competitors are going to be doing it, and you're really at a disadvantage if you're not trying to find a way to use these tools to drive your business.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It would be foolish to think that this is not going to be a part of our life going forward. All you have to do is look at our kids, and see how business is done, at that level, and that that's going to be a key issue. In fact, if you're a distributor of products, or you have it's almost any business, you have to rethink how you're going to communicate with the next generation.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's all kinds of implications, including for recruiting, human resources internally, how you relate to your employees. It's really changing quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
With all your expertise that you have. When you look at the boardroom and board members and the growing challenges that they have, and it seems like every year, something gets introduced. We had say on pay. Well, who knows if there's a say on something, that's going to follow. What worries you most, or what, I'll also say what encourages you most? What worries you most, encourages you most about when you look at the boardroom in the future?
I think what worries me most is, what you've talked about a little bit in terms of the additional requirements that keep getting added. And it's all additive. There's nothing being subtracted. And, it's perfectly understandable why that's happening. But basically, people have discovered that corporate governance and SEC disclosures are a way into the company where other avenues might have been blocked for you. So, for example, with this conflict minerals issue, this is not something that somebody would knock on the door and just start talking to the company about, but by forcing or by having Congress pass a law that requires certain line item SEC disclosures, all of a sudden it forces the company to have that discussion and figure out whether this applies to them or not. And it can be used for very legitimate causes, but it can also be used for things that are somewhat questionable in terms of the value to the entire investment community. So I think people are, activists are getting more clever in terms of how do they work that angle in Congress and essentially get their specific issue into an SEC regulation that requires some kind of line item disclosure. And what I think we're going to see are 10-Ks and annual reports just get longer and longer because of this. And it all has to clear the board level at some point. The board signs these documents. They're going to want to know, how did you come up with these disclosures? The CEO and CFO have to certify to these. And so I think that it's going to, it leaves less and less time for discussion about business and strategy. And so, the other day I was joking with someone saying that, pretty soon the boards are going to have to create a special committee on business and profitability, because all their time is used up with compliance type things that, you almost have to intentionally carve out time to talk about strategy. And it should really be the opposite. And so with limited time, boards probably have to set some kind of a limit and say, 50% is the max we're going to devote to time-wise in terms of process and compliance issues. And the other 50%, we really just have to focus on the strategy, focus on talent, the people, leadership, succession, all these things that are really fundamental to the business when you think about it.
Well, Doug, thank you for being with us.
Sure, thank you.
You have a great reputation as a corporate secretary, and we've just built upon your unwanted reputation as the guru of social media. So
I embrace it now. So
okay, well that's good, because I don't think it's going to go away.
Exactly.
This show isn't doing anything to help it go away. But just one announcement before we break on the show. I just want to let everybody know that coming up in the spring, on actually late winter, on February 29th and March 1st, we will be holding our West Coast Peer Exchange and West Coast Boardroom Summit. This is a takeoff on our large annual Boardroom Summit that's typically held in New York in October. Great opportunity for you to have your directors attend events that we hold, and this event in particular is a great information. Those of you that are part of the board education program, the nice part is you have the ability to send your directors, your corporate secretary, and your general counsel as part of that program without any registration fee. So we look forward to seeing you. It's going to be held in Scottsdale, Arizona, the end of February. Not a bad place to be at that time of the year, so hopefully we'll see many of you there. And with that, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll have another This Week in the Boardroom, where we'll cover a topic that'll help you be a better board member and better committee member. We'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.